So today I'm going to be making some stock. Here's some dried up radishes that basically dehydrated in my uh, fridge. Some onion peels, and I filled the pot with water. Here is the rotisserie chicken carcass and some lettuce and veggie scraps from my freezer. Whenever I do veggies, I put them in a Ziploc bag in the freezer to make broth. And here's another bag of them. And I will be making a big pot of broth. And with part of the broth, I'm going to be making chicken noodle soup. So I'm just going to turn the stove on. And I'm going to add a hot pepper to the broth to give it a little bit of extra flavor. Yep. And I'm going to put the squash that I got free from Greta's garden in here to cook while adding flavor to the broth, and then I will use the squash in other recipes. Here we go. There's about 3 whole small squashes that I'm putting in here, and they will definitely add vitamins and nutrients to the broth as they cook. This will make the broth super tasty and nutritious. And I'm just going to put a lid on this and let it boil. Here we go. Let's stir this up. It's been boiling for about an hour. You could see that those radishes reconstituted themselves and got fully plump. And look how the color of the broth is nice and brown. And I took out the squashes to be used in other recipes. This week I like having it with a bit of butter and salt and pepper. And I'm going to have one for lunch. And here's the strained broth. And there's the veggies that are going into the compost. And this part of the broth is going to be made into a quick chicken noodle soup. Here's some rainbow carrots from the farm, and here's some onions and some celery, and then I'm just gonna bring that to a boil. I'm adding the leftover rotisserie chicken. There's about a cup and a half of it. I'm gonna throw it into this pot, and the soup will easily feed us for a meal for the family. Oops, there we go. Grab that out of there. That slipped. But yeah, I'm not going to put pasta in this right now. I'm going to cook the pasta separate, and that way whatever's left over of this I will put into jars for in the fridge, or possibly pressure can it for later use to be on the shelf. So this I'm going to cook for about an hour on the stove, bring it to a boil and then simmer, and it will be quite yummy and tasty. Just going to stir this up, and oops, a bit foggy there. This is a cheap and frugal meal that is using leftovers like chicken from another meal. So a rotisserie chicken, here's some pasta that I'm going to use with it that I cooked extra the other day. But a rotisserie chicken makes a meal of rotisserie chicken and at least 1 or 2 meals of either soup as one meal or as another meal. I'm going to add some steak spice and some there's a steak spice. This I get from Costco in a big, huge container. Steaming up, and I'm gonna add some garlic powder, as I just didn't feel like chopping up garlic. And stir that up. Then here's the finished bowl with the noodles. Let's heat up the chicken, the veggies, quite yummy. Might put a splash of hot sauce to the soup to give it a bit more flavor, but not everybody likes it, so we'll do that in our individual bowls. So there it is. This is, quick and easy. I cooked it for about 40 minutes just so that all the veggies are done. I'm just going to put a little bit of lemon pepper seasoning on it, as I find that the lemon flavor brings out the other flavors in the soup. I like to put lemon juice or lemon peels in the broth when I'm making it to bring flavors. Tastes really good. Thumbs up. This meal costs maybe $1 to feed a family of 4. And look how this was at about the 4-liter mark, so it made about 4 liters of soup, and it's still quite a lot of stuff in the broth without even the noodles. So I'm adding the noodles individually into people's bowls. This will make at least 2 meals, and I have more broth right here that I'm just going to put into jars and leave them in the fridge. And I might pressure can them later on if we don't use them. But I plan to use this broth for another soup. Maybe a butternut squash soup or something else. I haven't quite figured that out yet. But this is a really healthy broth. This broth costs me nothing except for the lids for the jars, while broth at the store costs $2 to $3 a liter, and I can sometimes get it for $1.50, while this costs me nothing. It costs me $1 for the lids if I pressure can it. And if I don't pressure can it, I could put it into any container in the freezer and not costing me anything. And it's much better tasting than the stuff from the store. And this soup, it's quite filling, and it's using cheap ingredients, and it will either be lunch for my family or as an extra for people to have. If they're still hungry after having supper, they can have a bowl of soup if there's not leftovers, as my husband likes to have seconds of some stuff or some other thing to have. And here's the soup, leftover soup I put into the jars to put in the fridge. These are green Bernardin jars. They're new. I got them last year, but they're of the vintage green, and I've called Bernardin, and I can use them in pressure canning. That's why they look like this. But they're not just for decoration. I just reused old lids because I'm putting them in the fridge. But if I'm going to pressure can them, I'm going to reheat this broth and soup and put them in a pot and can them properly. But we'll see what is eaten up in the next few days. And that's how I have meals on hand. These will stay in my fridge, and they are really cheap and yummy.